Yeah? Now this series A with 33 beads, it depends on the 33 beads in order to be series A, yeah? If I take these beads off, it no longer is series A, because series A is definable by the beads.
Okay, but that's
Likewise, the universe is definable by its parts. The Earth, the solar system, the galaxy, and whatever. What we're saying is that anything which is made up of parts like this is dependent by definition, because it's dependent on its parts. And if it's dependent, it requires something outside of itself in order to bring it into being, and in order for it to depend on. For example, one more thing. Let me just give you 2 or 3 examples, right? My phone here. Okay, I got a phone, yeah? Okay. Can't be bothered. Take it out and stuff. You know, it depends on what? Your phone depends on what?
The process of the screen.
Right, but what do you have to do every day or 2 with your phone? You have to charge it, right? So without charging it, it dies, right? But that charge that you put your phone in depends on something else. Some power plant that's generating it. And that power plant depends on something else. And it'll go back to the sun. And that sun depends on something else. And it'll go back to the universe and its constants and all these kind of things. The laws of nature. And so on. And I'm saying that if you keep going back in that manner, even if you don't go back antecedently like in that way, but if you keep asking the same question, what does it depend upon? Then you have to end off with an unterminatable terminator. An unterminatable terminator, which in this case we believe is the independent that brings about everything else dependent into being. Let me tell you something else. So that's one example. Another example, have you ever been to the sea? You've seen the sea, yeah? If you go to the sea, you've never seen the sea floor. You look at the sea and you realize that the water, because of its nature, its scientific nature, yeah, it needs to be situated somewhere. And the placeholder for this water is the floor, the sea floor. You've never seen the sea floor, and I've never seen the sea floor, but we assume and infer its existence because without the foundation, which is the sea floor, all of this water couldn't be situated anywhere. What I'm saying is the sea floor in this reality is actually dependent on something else, which is the geological landscape, the tectonic plates, whatever it may be, yeah? But reality itself must have an independent thing which everything else is situated and everything else stands upon. And if it doesn't have that, it's inexplicable. It's unintelligible. There is no way that it's impossible, I'm making the claim, without a necessary existence through which everything else must depend upon, and it depends upon nothing. I'm making the claim that absurdities would occur. That without such necessary existence, there are absurdities. That is the claim I'm making. And so, because if you think about necessity is the opposite of impossibility.
But, okay, so now you're applying objectivity into your belief system, because before you were applying subjectivity because we were talking about good and evil and stuff like that, but now you're applying objectivity. But now I need to ask, why are you so certain about the dependency of different things? Because, I mean, just because you say this is how it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it keeps going on, doesn't necessarily mean it is that way. Because again, you're not omniscient, you do not know. Despite, as you said with the seafloor, that's a great example, right? You can look at the sea and assume a seafloor is there, but you will never actually know until you go. And you might actually go into the sea and realize, oh shit, there's no sea floor. And what would you do at that point when there is no sea floor?
No, but it's an analogy. I'm giving you an analogy that we are familiar with, right? Yeah. Okay, but let me get, that's like what you call a cosmological analogy, that which has reference to the universe. But I can just as much give you a mathematical analogy, which works on a priori reasoning. So let me give you an example, right? I'm going to give it to you as a syllogism, okay? Any mathematical set now let me make it clearer. Any non-empty mathematical set depends upon its members in order to exist. Set A, let's call it, for the sake of argument, whether it's finite or infinite, is a mathematical set. Therefore, set A depends upon its members in order to exist. What I'm saying is, this exact thing that I'm talking about can be reasoned on a priori mathematical grounds in as much the same way as it can be reasoned in a cosmological sense. In other words, I can give you examples in the world like I just gave you right now, examples of the ocean and so on. But I can also give you examples in mathematics. Now, if one has to, in order to disprove what I'm saying here, one has to show how it's explicable or otherwise conceivable that you can have a non-empty mathematical set that does not depend on its members in order to exist.
But, I mean, I can't remember the book, but there are a few people who have proven that mathematics in itself makes no sense, because relativism...
You're referring... Yeah. No. I know what you're referring to. The person who is most famous for making this postulation was a man called Kurt Gödel, okay? And he had two theorems called incompleteness theorems, which you refer to. But you'll be surprised to know, he was actually talking about set theory, in fact, as well. But Kurt Gödel made an ontological argument for God's existence. And the ontological argument that he made is not dissimilar from the one that I'm making right now. So the same man you're using as an authority is the same man who agrees with me, really, on what I am saying. Just like Leibniz agrees with me. Just like Aristotle agrees with me. Just like Avicenna agrees with me. Just like Aquinas agrees with me. And who disagrees? There are only a few people in history worth their intellectual worth, with intellectual worth, that come in the Enlightenment period. Like Immanuel Kant, who said existence is not a predicate. Or David Hume, who denied necessity and causation. Or Bertrand Russell, famously, who argued for composition, fallacy of composition. If we're he's not a professional philosopher.
And maybe I didn't make myself very clear. I'm not arguing against the existence of God. Again, like I've always said, like I said from the beginning, I'm not omniscient. So far as I'm concerned, anything could freaking exist. That tree could be a lion for all I know, because again, I'm not omniscient. I cannot objectively state things as fact.
But you keep saying you're not omniscient as if that's an argument. Listen, you're not omniscient, but you are making claims. Do you understand?
Yeah.
You are saying you are continuously making claims. You don't need to be omniscient to make truth claims.
No, but you need to be omniscient to objectively, well, paradoxically speaking, from a Salto standpoint, which we always use, me and you use to justify things. You need to be omniscient to justify things.
No, you don't. Yeah, well, 2 plus 2 is true or false.
That is true.
From a mathematical perspective.
Society demands and needs objectivity
Look,
to work.
You don't know everything. Do not need to know everything to know the truth of some things. Yeah? Yeah, so this idea that I'm not omniscient, is agnostics run away from discussion all the time by claiming ignorance. Agnostics, I'm not saying you are one, they might as well just change their name to ignorant ones. No, that's what it is. Because an agnostic doesn't know. All right, so if you don't know, what word do we use for that in English? It's ignorant. Sorry to say, you can call yourselves ignoramuses. You know, dumb, the dumb ones. Or, you know, whatever. Like, these are not pejorative terms. They're actually synonyms for agnosticism. It's uncomfortable for some people to know that they're dumb or ignorant. But just because they're ignorant on something, it doesn't mean everyone else has to be ignorant just like them. You know, I'm ignorant of many things. Special relativity doesn't mean, just because I'm ignorant, it doesn't mean it's not true. This is called the fallacy of, well, you've got two fallacies here. You know how the universe started. Pardon? No, I haven't. I've never made such a claim. I don't care about that. You can come and sit down after if you want to have a discussion. But let me finish with my friend first. What I was saying was simply, no, I didn't make the claim about the universe, beginning of the universe or lack thereof. I'm not making a Ghazalian argument. I'm making a dependency argument. Yeah, so the beginning of the universe, or the eternality of it, or the eternality of a fabric of space, or the infinity of the multiverse, any of that stuff, I grant it all, no problem. It still does not solve what I am putting forward. All of that does not solve what I am putting forward.
I know something that might do. It's called the no boundary condition.
Okay.
By Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, no, it won't do it. That won't do it.
He said, like, instead of having this thing where everything's dependent on something else, you can have a universe which is in like a quantum state. No boundary condition.
Yes, but if there's only two options that one has.
Paradox, where it's like they exist between two points.
Possibly.
Listen, there's only two exhaustive, if in an elimination argument, in a reductio argument, in whatever type of argument where in a logical disjuncture, you've only got two options. Either the universe is dependent or the universe is independent. There is absolutely no third option. And what I'm saying is, if you say it's dependent, if you say it's independent, then I say you've already admitted to the independence of something, which is exactly what I was trying to get you to do in the first place. Because if it's independent, that must mean everything relies upon it and it relies upon nothing. It's eternally independent, it's necessarily independent. You're talking about God, but calling it the universe.
Yeah.
Right, now but the problem is, if the universe isn't, what I'm saying is the universe can't be independent. Why? Because anything that is made up of parts is dependent on those parts by definition in order to exist. Like, I'll say this again, these beads, 33 beads here. Let's call this bead A, yeah? If it is 32 beads, it no longer is the same thing. If it is one bead, it's something else now. It's become something else. In order for this to be what it is, it depends upon its constituent parts. That's it. The universe has made out of parts. Anything that is made out of parts is dependent. The universe is made out of parts. Therefore, the universe is dependent. And one can say, well, actually, that might not be the case or whatever it is. I'll add another thing. That's the case. Yeah, no problem. That is the case cosmologically, and it's the case ontologically as well. How mathematically, yes. Because a mathematical set, what is a set? A set is, for example, if I say you've got three things in a set. Camera 1, 2, and 3. You got a set of, you can have a set of whatever number you like. You can choose whatever set. Me and you, that's one set. We call it me and you is one set. Yeah? Set, we call it set A, which is me and you in it. Okay, so in order for that set to exist, me and you have to exist first. So it presupposes my existence and your existence in order for the set to exist. Now I'm saying that anything that presupposes an existence of something else depends on those things and is dependent. It can't be independent. Now that means there has to be something that's independent and outside of the series in order to explicate the preponderance of everything else. And for there to be intelligibility, well, how can we intelligibly understand the state of affairs? We can only do so with the existence of the necessary thing. And what that necessary thing, by definition, is God. We call it God. You don't have to call it God. You can call it the necessary thing. Now, here's the thing. What have we already established about this necessary thing? That it's eternal. Because if it's independent, there's no point at which it cannot be independent. It cannot be contingent at some times and independent. It has to be independent always. If it's like that, it also has to be what? Pre-eternal, post-eternal, which means eternal in all directions. It must be non-composite. In other words, it's not made out of parts. We just explained why, yeah? It must be, if you believe in causation, because some people don't believe in causation, I'm putting an if here. If one believes in causation, which, if you don't, by the way, there's absurdities going on, but I want to keep causation away. If you have infinite possibilities, you can have it. It's not a problem. It does not defy what I'm saying right now.
Causality does, because causality is one thing happening after another thing.
Not always. You can have retro causality with the quantum field and stuff. Something happens before, something happens, effects that happen. Something. People talk about I'm not sure if you can have retro causality, but people speak of it, and that's why I'm saying that I'm leaving causality out of the picture for now, because it's a separate argument. I can argue from causality, but I'm not arguing from causality. I'm just arguing from dependence at the moment. What I'm saying is, if you look at that, so it must be that. Now the question is, what about will, choice? How do we prove that God is choosing things? Now, the way I answer this is as follows. Anything which is contingent and dependent, it could have been another way. What do we mean by it could have been another way? I mean to say that it could have been, if it's way A, it could have been way B. For example, these beads could have been yellow. They could have been green. But 2 + 2 = 4 can never be anything but 4. If I put 2 + 2 together, it can never be 4. And if it's dependent, it must mean that if it's dependent on something else. Because by definition, if it's dependent on itself, it will be independent. So 2 things. It could have been another way and it's dependent. Anything that could have been another way and is dependent implies that there was an external sorting agent. That this necessary being is now deciphering, making a decision, choice. It should be way A rather than way B. Like, for example, the person who created these beads decided that it will be brown. He could have or she could have decided it will be yellow. He could have or she could have decided it will be green. But a decision was made on the color of these beads. You could say, well, actually no decision was made. There's so many things in nature which things are the way they are because of something else. But even if that is the case, then you have the regress problem that we talked about. So you have to have a terminatable thing. But the universe is one way rather than another. Now someone might be a determinist and say, well, actually, if everything is like that because of an antecedent causal chain. I say, even that's no problem, I agree. But it's determined in conjunction with the determiner, which is the necessary existence. But in abstraction, it cannot be said to be necessary, because anything necessary can never be out of existence. There was a time, the Quran says, وَقَدْ خَلَقَتُكَ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَلَمْ تَكُ شَيْئًا, that we had created you before and you were nothing before that. There was a time I never existed, and there was a time you never existed. Which means we can't be necessary, by definition, because something necessary is eternally necessary, it's internally independent. Which means that in abstraction, if you take that thing in abstraction, there's no quality within me of necessity. Because if there was a quality of necessity within me, I could never cease to be. There would be no time in which Muhammed Hijab, the learned one, would have been... There would have been no time where Muhammed Hijab would have not been in existence. I would have been an eternal soul. Or not even eternal soul, eternal body and soul. Pre-eternal and post-eternal. Now what I'm saying is that that's not the case, which is indication that I'm contingent, that I am dependent. So this is evidence that there is an independent entity that gave rise to everything else in existence, and that everything else in existence depends upon it. And if you don't have that, you can't have anything in existence. We would not be having a conversation right now. One question that if you ever have time to think about in your home is just one question. Why is there something rather than nothing? Think about that for a second. How can that even be explicable? The only way it can be explicable is if that there was something else which was always there, which is necessary, it could not be any other way, that brought rise to that. No other explanation is possible. I'm not even saying is allowable or is intelligible. I'm saying it's even possible. There's no other